Hey everybody, welcome to Friday Lunchtime Devotions. We are continuing with our Fruit of the Spirit series. We've done love, joy, peace, and today we're going to do patience. So I was thinking, what are some situations where you have to be patient? Some things that I was thinking about were when you're in traffic, when you have to wait in lines. Sometimes with little kids, you have to be patient. If you're like waiting for them to put on their shoes, it takes like forever. Maybe you've had to teach like your mom or your dad or your grandpa, somebody older, how to use some type of technology during this season. Probably about 2 months ago, I had to teach my grandma how to use Zoom, and it took a long time. Maybe you've had an experience like that. Maybe when you're cooking good food, you have to wait for it. It takes a long time. It takes more time than it would take to make a sandwich. Sometimes when we're waiting for Christmas or waiting for school to get out, it takes patience. What are some things that you guys have to be patient for? Patience has a lot to do with time. When you have an idea of how time should be going and it's going in a different direction, or maybe when you have a certain time frame of how something should go and someone else or something isn't working on your timeline, you have to be patient. Patience is about waiting. It's about persevering even when things are going slower or taking more time than we want. And so I'm going to read you guys a Psalm 31, and David is talking about all of these different troubles that he's facing. We're going to read verses 9 through 13, and he says, "Be merciful to me, O Lord, for I am in distress. My eyes grow weak with sorrow, and my body is filled with grief. My life is consumed by anguish, and my years by groaning. My strength fails because of my affliction, and my bones grow weak. Because of all the enemies, I am in utter contempt of my neighbors. I am a dread to my friends. Those who see me on the street flee from me. I am forgotten by them as though I were dead. I become broken like pottery, and I hear the slander of many. There is terror on either side. They conspire against me and plot to take my life." I know you may be thinking, like, what does this have to do with time and patience? But lots of times we have situations where you have to be patient that are kind of trivial, like waiting for Christmas. They don't, maybe they mean a lot, but they're not super serious, right? But then there are other times where we have to be patient and wait for God to bring healing or bring redemption or bring help. And that's the situation that David was in, right? He says that he's been in anguish waiting for God to rescue for years. He says, "My years have been filled with groaning." He's been in this painful situation for a long time. He's been calling out to God and waiting for God to rescue. His friends don't want to be near him. He feels like everybody's forgotten him. He feels broken, overwhelmed, and exhausted. And he's having to wait for God to come and rescue him. He's crying out to the Lord, and it kind of feels like God is being slow in responding. It kind of feels like God is taking probably more time to come and rescue him than David would want. And in verse 14 through 15, God says this, or David says this, "But I trust you, O Lord. I say, you are my God. My times are in your hands. Deliver me from my enemies and from those who pursue me." He says, my times are in your hands. Most of the way we think about time is like it's a possession. We say, it's my time, or it's your time, or maybe we lose time, or we gain some time. Sometimes I have some spare time. We say time is money. We talk about how you spend your time. We might say, did you waste your time doing something? And sometimes, and often in our culture, we tend to think that time belongs to us. And when time doesn't get used the way that we want, we get frustrated or impatient. But David says, my times are in God's hands. He's saying that time belongs to God, and it's something that God has ultimate control over. And God is trustworthy and powerful. He says, I trust you, my time is in your hands. So patience the way we think about time is actually a trust thing. Maybe I feel like something is taking too much time, but God is trustworthy and my time is in his hands. And David is kind of saying, like, this season, right, of waiting is hard. But his time is in God's hands, and he trusts God to sustain him and provide for him throughout it. Maybe the time being spent here is time that I wish I could spend somewhere else. But my time is in your hands, God, and I trust that you are doing something good here, even if it wasn't what I would have chosen. Maybe the time here feels like, maybe I feel like I'm losing time on the other side of this hard thing. But I trust that my time is in your hands, and I trust that you are doing some mighty work to rescue and redeem the time and make it valuable. In verses 19 through 24, David says this: "How great is your goodness, which you have stored up for those who fear you, which you bestow in the sight of men. On those you take refuge in. In the shelter of your presence you hide them from the intrigues of men. In your dwelling you keep them safe from accusing tongues. Praise be to the Lord, for he shows his wonderful love to me when I was besieged in the city. In my alarm I said, I am cut off from your sight. And yet you heard my cry for mercy, and when I called to you for help. Love the Lord, all his saints. The Lord preserves the faithful, but the proud he pays back in full. Be strong, take heart, all you who hope in the Lord." So, in this season of waiting, where it feels like God isn't answering as quickly as maybe David would like, David stops and he thinks about God's goodness. He seeks shelter in God's presence. He thinks about God's love. He thinks about how even when it feels like, I love that verse, verse 22, when it says, "In my alarm I said, I am cut off from your sight." He's freaking out and he's like, God, you can't see me. But then he remembers, but yet God hears my cry for mercy. He hears when I cry for help. He's remembering the true things about who God is, that he hears him, that he's there, that he's present. David puts his hope in the Lord. And David perseveres through this situation. He moves through it with patience. He waits for God to show up and do his stuff. And when we're in situations where things are moving slow, maybe there are situations like waiting for healing or restoration or rescue. Maybe there are situations where we're waiting for God to answer and it feels like it's taking a really long time. Maybe it's a situation that's a little more like silly and chill, like trying to teach grandma how to use Zoom or waiting for our siblings to get out of the bathroom. But in all of those situations, we can take a pause when we're starting to feel ourselves get impatient and get frustrated, or feel like in despair, like it's never going to happen. We can take a pause and we can remember, my time is in his hands. We can stop and we can think about God's goodness. We can think about his love and his faithfulness. We can think about how much hope we have in Jesus, about how God is accomplishing his purposes even when things aren't going on my timeline. We can think about how sometimes God is even accomplishing his purposes because things aren't on my timeline. We can think about how trustworthy and faithful Jesus is. And as we think about these things, as we think about all of who God is, the truth of who God is, God's Spirit begins to produce patience within us. And we can move through those situations with an attitude that is gracious and kind towards the people around us. And other people will get to experience the love of Jesus through us. So here's some journal questions for you guys. What things are causing you to be impatient about in this season? Where are you feeling impatient? Number 2, what is some character of God that can help you? Where have you seen his goodness? And number 3, spend some time thinking about that phrase. When you're starting to feel impatient, maybe spend some time just memorizing that phrase. My time is in his hands. My time is in his hands. My time is in his hands. Because when we remember that God is in control of our time, we can be patient because God is trustworthy. I'm super excited to hopefully see you guys tomorrow at my house. Bring your swimsuit, bring a mask to wear when you're not in the pool, and bring your own snacks and water if you would like some, and bring a towel. And we're going to have some fun. We're going to swim. If you're in middle school, we'll swim from 1 to 2:30. If you're in high school, we'll swim from 2:30 to 4. And I'll let you guys know we're going to come in that side gate. And I hope to see you all tomorrow. Bye.